This is Greg Thomas, and welcome to the Leadership Excellence channel. I've invited Paul Thornton, a recognized leadership influencer, to come on my channel and discuss his latest book. Our previous podcast with Paul, we discussed two other books that he's written. In July of last year, we had a podcast on his book, Performance Management for New Managers. And then our first podcast together was in October of 2022. We discussed his book, The Leadership Process. Are you effective at each step of the leadership process? And I will put a link to those two videos in the comments area. I've had the pleasure of knowing Paul for over 20 years, and his entire career has been focused on management and leadership development. Paul is a prolific author, consultant, and trainer. He has also presented numerous seminars and workshops. Paul is also a former professor of business administration. In today's video, we will discuss his latest book. Make sure that I get it here on the screen. Is Your Organization Aligned? Now, I ordered mine through Amazon, as I usually do. Came within a couple of days. Very interesting and insightful book. Very easy read. One thing about Paul's writing style is it's very clear and focused, very easy to read. So I strongly recommend that you go ahead and get this book. I see my camera, it looks like it's blurring it a little bit. There we go. There's a clear view of his book.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And Paul, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Greg, for having me on. I love these conversations and I appreciate being invited back. So great to be here and great to talk about another book. So thank you.
Great. You're welcome, and it's great to have you with us today. And I will have all of Paul's contact information also in the comments area. If you like this video and you would like to see more just like it, feel free to give us a like on the video. We appreciate that very much. So let's go ahead and begin. Paul, just what is organizational alignment and why is it important?
Okay, good question to start with. Organizational alignment, for me anyway, is making all of the parts of the organization integrated and coordinated in support of the strategy. If you do that, you'll have a highly aligned organization. Now, what does that mean? It means that the organization will be very effective. They'll be focused on the right things. And secondly, they'll be very efficient. There'll be no waste. They'll be very productive. Studies have shown that highly aligned organizations, three things. Number one, they're more profitable. Number two, they have happier employees, or more engaged employees, I should say. And number three, they have happier customers. So, I mean, that's exactly what you want. When you think about alignment from a personal point of view, when we're aligned, our thoughts, our comments, our behavior, when everything's aligned, we feel most effective and most productive. And it's the same idea with an organization. Now, organizations, as we know, are complex. There's lots and lots of pieces and parts, and getting it all working together is challenging. You've heard the expression before, getting everybody rowing in the same direction.
Yes.
And that's kind of like what a highly aligned organization is. Everybody is clear on what they're doing, why they're doing it, the mission, vision, values, all that is, everybody's in sync with it. It's integrated, coordinated. Life is beautiful. So that's kind of my take on it.
Okay, well, that's great. Let's just step back a second. You mentioned the importance of it being aligned with the strategy. So how important is it to have a really good, effective, well thought out strategy? Obviously, if you didn't create a good strategy and you make all this effort to align everything to this poor strategy, then you're not going to have the results you want either, correct?
I think that is so accurate, Greg. The number one thing that the senior leadership team needs to get right is the strategy. If you have the wrong strategy, you're going to be producing products and services that the customers don't want or need. That is a recipe for failure. The strategy has to attract and retain customers. It has to make you competitive in the marketplace. So yeah, if you don't have the right strategy, you're in trouble. We see that all the
Mm-hmm.
time with companies, with athletic teams. It doesn't matter. You got to get the strategy right. So that's a key or big responsibility for the senior leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Paul, no organization is perfect or without problems. You know that. You've worked with
Mm,
many organizations. They all struggle to one degree. I think it was Dr. Stephen Covey who once said they're all a mess was
mm.
his phraseology about most organizations. Can you point out a few teams or groups that you believe are organizationally aligned that we might call good examples of alignment?
Yeah, I can, Greg, but
Mm,
before I get to that, let me just
sure.
highlight what you said. Um, there's lots of problems we see all the time, right? In
Yes.
businesses, the strategy isn't working right. The employees don't have the skills and experiences to implement the strategy. The values aren't aligned. People don't really buy into the values.
Hmm.
The organization is overly complex. There's silos. Each department is doing their own little thing, but it's not really integrated. They're not working as one cohesive unit. So yeah, there's lots of problems and issues and things that occur. But if you think about on the positive side, if you think about a pit crew at a racetrack or a marching band at a college football game, or some highly performing athletic teams, you kind of get a sense of what that can look like.
Hmm.
Everybody on the team or in the group is focused. They know their roles and responsibilities. They understand the goals, the strategy that they're implementing. Everything is coordinated, integrated. They're performing at a very high level. You know, those are some examples of what
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
looks like when you have high alignment equals high performance.
Great. That's a good example. So, can you share with us the difference between two types of alignment you mentioned in the book, horizontal and vertical alignment? Some organizations may be very good at one of the two, but not so good at the other. And obviously, they're both important. So, can
Mm-hmm.
you talk about that for a few minutes?
Yes. Yeah, vertical, from the top of the organization to the bottom, all employees understand the company's strategy. They understand it and support it. There's great clarity around it.
Hmm.
And we could go even further. They understand the company's mission, vision, values, and strategy. So they're clear on what this company's all about, how they're making a difference, how they're adding value. That's alignment. Now, the question is, how often does that happen?
Hmm.
Various studies have found that if you go into a company and start asking employees, what's your mission or what's your strategy? How do you compete in the marketplace, et cetera, somewhere between, 30 to 50% of the employees will not have a good, clear understanding of the strategy. And that's a problem.
Hmm.
Again, I believe the senior leaders need to make sure everybody is clear on what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, all of that. That's important.
Right.
Horizontal alignment is looking across the organization. Um, when you think about the cross-functional teams and the processes that go across the organization, and the communications and information that flows across the organization, is that all integrated, coordinated? Is it, make
Hmm.
sense?
Hmm.
Is it working effectively? Well, and I know there's loads and loads of communication breakdowns that occur. People misinterpret things, processes break down at various parts. So again, we don't always have perfect alignment going across the organization either. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we have some examples I mentioned before of instances where we might see some really great performance and everything is intact. And, sometimes we say people are in the flow. Well, the
Mm-hmm. Right.
organization
Right.
is in the flow,
Mm-hmm.
everything's working exactly the way it should be. And that's a great thing. And that's kind of horizontal. So the senior leadership team's got to be mindful of both of those, both achieving vertical alignment and
Mm-hmm.
horizontal. Both are
Right.
important.
Okay. Well, good. That's an excellent
Mm,
explanation. Appreciate that very much.
mm,
Now, in your book, you discuss the 7S factors that
mhm,
need to be aligned in every question. I've never heard that term before. Maybe it's something that you've come up with after
mm.
creating the factors to understand how it all works and how it's all aligned together. Can you give us an overview of these 7S factors?
Sure. 7S factors are the seven, I think, major parts and pieces that have to work together to have a high performing, highly aligned organization. So briefly, the senior leadership team is 1S. They need to work
Mm-hmm.
together. And as I said before, they need to come up with and implement an effective strategy. Number two is shared values. The senior leadership team's got to come up with the values that make sense for the organization,
Mm-hmm.
and those values need to support the strategy. I think that's important. And then you get into the organizational structure, systems, the staff, and their skills. So those are all the S's, and
Mm-hmm.
they need to work together and be integrated, coordinated to achieve a high performing, highly aligned organization. And one thing I might add too is some
Sure.
companies will, change one of these S factors. For example, if a company is changing their strategy, they also have to be mindful of what other changes in the organization need to make place so we'll have an aligned structure and we'll have an aligned organization.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of talk these days about systems thinking, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Organizations are systems. There's lots of parts and pieces that work together, interact with each other. If you change one factor, you're going to have to change probably two or three other factors to make it all work. So you got to be mindful of that. A lot of times they don't. They change one piece and then wonder why isn't it working? Well, it's
Mm-hmm.
not working because you didn't change, something over here in human resources, or you didn't give people the skills they need to make it happen, etc. So that's a
Okay.
problem.
Well, Paul, one of the particular 7S's that you mentioned was staff.
Hmm.
So, how does a leader know if the wrong people are employed in various positions in the organization? And obviously, if you put a square peg in a round hole, you're going to have a real challenge with alignment.
Mm. Well, part of, leadership's responsibility is to evaluate people's performance.
Mm-hmm.
So they're evaluating what the person's achieving, their output, as well as how they're doing it. Does their behavior align with the company values? So over the course of a period of time, you're evaluating people to see, are they achieving what they need to achieve? Are they getting it done? Are they living the company values, et cetera?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, Greg, and I know that many companies have some people that don't get done what they need to get done. They're not effective leaders or managers, or they don't have the skill set that they need to perform in their job,
Mm-hmm.
or they get it done, but they don't live the company values. They're,
Right.
I don't know, ruthless or yell and scream, and they put people down, and they're not a good team player.
Mm-hmm.
They're not open, et cetera, et cetera. So in evaluating people's performance, you're identifying those that don't fit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, before you get to that, though, or when that occurs, I should say, the question is, can I coach the person? Can I give them feedback? Can I help them improve and change their performance and be successful? I mean, every leader, every manager is trying to do that. Sometimes you succeed at that, sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
don't. Some people just are not, I don't know, they're closed-minded, they're not open to feedback, they're not willing to make the adjustments and changes they need to, so they have to move
Mm-hmm.
on to another position or another company or do something different. So over time, you should be identifying those that don't fit or align with your
Mm-hmm.
culture, with your strategy. They may not have the skill set, or they may not buy the strategy. They may not think it's an
Mm-hmm.
effective strategy.
Right.
So over time, you're kind of replacing them and putting the right people or the people that have the right skills and values into those roles, and hopefully that improves things and you get better results.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, Paul, one of the action items that you mentioned near the end of the book is to make alignment a topic on the agenda at all meetings. Can you expand on this point and how someone can do that?
Yeah, I think alignment is really an important topic, and it's one that doesn't get discussed enough in companies. Um, for example, there was one company that was having an offsite meeting, and they were reviewing all of their initiatives and programs that they were working on.
Mm-hmm.
And when they stepped back and they looked at them, they discovered that about 50% of the programs and initiatives they were pursuing really didn't align with their strategy.
Mm.
So you kind of scratch your head and say, how could that be? Well, I don't know. A manager of a function gets an idea to do something and he sells it to the senior leadership team.
Mm-hmm.
And before you know it, they say, yeah, let's do that. And it
Yeah.
sounds good, but it
Mm-hmm.
really doesn't support the strategy?
Right.
So,
Sure.
as I say, these misalignments can
Mm-hmm.
come in gradually and slowly. And before you know it, you're doing 28 things that are like half of them don't really fit your strategy and don't help you be successful or productive. So I think you got to discuss alignment at your staff meeting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to be a long discussion, but give people a chance to identify any misalignments they've come across,
Mm-hmm.
and then think about what can we do to correct it and change it. Um, in the book, I mentioned CVS Pharmacy, which has something like 2,000 stores across the US. Back in 2014, they were selling cigarettes, and cigarettes accounted for 1.5 billion of their revenue.
Wow.
Yeah, big amount.
Mm-hmm.
Yet their mission was to help people live healthier lives. Now, that's an obvious misalignment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm
Sure.
trying to help people live healthier lives, but I sell cigarettes.
Yeah.
But I'm making 1.5 billion from these cigarettes. So it was a tough decision, but the senior team said, no, we cannot sell cigarettes or tobacco products. It doesn't align with our mission.
Mm-hmm.
And they decided to stop selling cigarettes. So that's a pretty big example of making the hard decision that we're going to have an aligned company. Everything we do is going to support our mission and our strategy, and that's what we're going to do. So
Mm-hmm.
that's important. One other example I like in the book
Yes.
I mentioned, one of my college students worked at a restaurant, and each night before the shift started, the shift supervisor got the staff together. It was like 10 people, and he would review one of the restaurant's values. The restaurant had like six
Mm-hmm.
values they operated.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So it'd take like one, like showing respect. And he would have a 5-minute stand-up meeting discussing that value. And he would talk to the staff about how are you going to show respect tonight? How are you going to show respect to your teammates? How are you going to show respect to your customers?
Mm,
What does disrespect look like? So my
mhm,
point here is he kept the values very meaningful and relevant. And again, if you looked at this restaurant, you would conclude they were very much aligned around the company values. It was an important piece of what they did. And of course, their values that they had supported the strategy. I forget exactly how they defined their strategy, but there was a strong connection between
mhm,
the values and the strategy. So my big idea is alignment is important. It's important to put the time and effort into identifying misalignments
mhm,
and then taking steps to correct them. Now, as I say, if every staff meeting you put this on the agenda for 10, 15 minutes, I think you're going a long way towards regularly discussing things that are popping up that don't align with what we say we believe,
mhm.
the way we say we're going to operate, et cetera, et cetera. And I think
Sure.
that makes for a much more healthy, um, productive, efficient, and effective company.
Yeah. And they say the most effective way to learn something is through spaced repetition. So
Mm,
if you're bringing it up at each meeting, you're helping to reinforce as a senior team that you believe this is important and valuable, and you're
hmm
reminding everyone else that it is.
exactly.
Well, Paul, I know
Exactly.
you've had an international focus in your career. You've done seminars outside of the United States. Can you share maybe a few of your experiences in the topics, locations of some of the seminars that you've
Mm.
done?
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I did a conference in Barcelona
Mm,
a few months back. I did one
hmm.
in Dubai. I did one in Kuwait.
Wow.
I did one in Belgium. So I've done it in 4 or 5 different countries now, and each one is very unique and
Hmm.
exciting. I learn a lot in these endeavors about what goes on in the country and how they operate and kind of how they run their businesses and what have you.
Sure.
So
Hmm.
it's a learning experience. And I also get a chance to learn how the managers and leaders think in these
Hmm.
various countries and
Yeah.
what are the little differences between the US and like a manager in Dubai, for example. How do they
Hmm.
operate? One thing I found that in Dubai, in terms of implementing change, they take their time. They want to get everyone to fully understand the change.
Hmm.
They get a lot of buy-in. They might spend a year to 2 years discussing the change. Like this company I was with
Right.
was implementing a new performance management process.
Hmm.
Now, in the United States, if I had to do that at the company I was at, my boss would have said, in 3 months, I want you to have this new performance
Yeah.
management program
Yeah.
up and running,
Right.
working, and have it fully
Exactly.
going 100%. In Dubai, they were going to take probably a year and a half to 2 years to discuss it, to think about it, to get people's opinions, to get people's buy-in, to see what the issues and problems might be.
Hmm.
Much more slow and patient in working out all the, I don't know, snags and
Hmm.
issues
Yeah.
than you'd find in the States. Now, they said that their implementation would be relatively easy once they get through all of these meetings and discussions and people get comfortable with it and all that.
Right.
But as I say, it would take a year and a half before it was going to be started, which
Hmm.
really amused me because as I say, I
Yeah.
was
There.
used to my boss saying in 3 months,
Sure.
this must be up and running and everybody must be doing it and you must have great buy-in and And of
Yeah.
course, that didn't always happen either.
Right.
There's
Correct.
probably some middle ground there that a year
Mm-hmm.
and a half is too long, but 3 months is too short.
Sure.
You
Sure.
know, it probably should be 6 months or so where you spend more time getting people comfortable with it. You do the proper training, answer questions, all that type of stuff. But we don't operate that way in the States.
No, we certainly don't. We have more of a um, pushy Western cultural approach to to
Mm,
those kinds of things, and
mm,
typically in American business.
mm.
So
Right.
you're a prolific author, Paul. What are you working on next?
Well, I'm working on this book that gets at this idea that providing the right amount is important. And by that, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, take the example of coaching. Sometimes a leader can provide too much coaching.
Mm-hmm.
At the other extreme, they can provide too little coaching. So finding that optimal amount of coaching, of instruction and feedback and what have you, I give my employee is critical. And it's hard to do. Sometimes we overdo it. We give them so much information, they're confused,
Mm-hmm.
they're overwhelmed, they're not sure what to do. Other times I work beside a manager who is great at managing up his boss and the senior leaders, but he was terrible at managing down. He did no
Mm-hmm.
coaching with his staff. They really got no guidance from him, and that was not good. So he did too little. As I say, I've seen others do way, way too much.
Mm-hmm.
I know myself, um, when I used to play hockey, well, I had one coach that would provide so much information. It was so confusing that you scratched your head and you weren't sure what you were supposed to do in certain situations
Yeah, sure.
on a power play or in a penalty situation or
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing.
Right.
He just gave so much information that it didn't work. I got a chance to observe a top college basketball coach conduct a practice, and what struck me was a lot of his coaching was very brief. It was like a minute or less. There was no long, lengthy discussions
Mm-hmm.
about anything. It was very focused, to the point, very precise. And again, that was a good example for me of he was providing what that player needed in that situation. One or two new insights was going to help that player perform at a much better level. Rather than some coaches go
Mm-hmm.
on and on. As I say, they provide way too much and it's overwhelming, confusing,
Sure.
and
Sure.
you don't know what to do. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Great.
kind of exciting, and I think it's a topic that hasn't been written about too much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's one that you need to think about, Am I
Right.
providing too much coaching?
Sure.
Am I
Sure.
providing too much information to my staff? Do I monitor them too much or too little? Where,
Mm-hmm.
where do I need to be on all these different dimensions of being a leader?
Right. And when do you hope to have that book published?
I hope to have it published by early summer, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Good. Well, Paul, thanks a million for joining us today. As always, I appreciate your leadership insight and your knowledge on effective management principles.
Mhm.
Appreciate it very, very much. And I hope that you'll come back in the future. Maybe we can do a podcast on your new book when it comes out this summer.
I love our discussions, Greg. And let me ask you one question.
Sure, absolutely.
What are you writing or working on these days?
Well, right now I am working on YouTube channels. I have two monetized YouTube channels,
Hmm.
and this is one of them, Leadership Excellence.
Hmm.
And I'm creating about two videos every week,
Hmm.
and it's different aspects of leadership. The series I'm on now is Great Leaders in History, in which we all, of course, all human beings are flawed and no one's perfect, but it focuses on international individuals, a different individual every week,
Hmm.
and the positive leadership skills, the change that they were able to initiate because of their leadership skills.
Hmm.
but we focus on all aspects of human development and leadership. So that's
Hmm.
the one thing that I'm focusing on right now. As far as writing a book, probably my next book will be a compilation of another thing that I have going on with this channel, and that is a motivational quote of the week. Again, every week I offer a different motivational quote from
Hmm.
people from all around the world and different cultures,
Yeah.
different individuals who have initiated change.
Yeah.
And I will put all of those together, or the top 200 or so, and also we'll put that together in a book, most
Mhm.
likely next year. So that's what I'm working on.
Well, as always, Greg, thank you so much and
Sure.
good discussion. And I love talking about leadership and appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us, Paul. This is Greg Thomas reminding all of you that it was the late Dr. Stephen Covey who wrote, "Leadership is a choice, not a position." So thanks for joining us today.